Hey everyone, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor for Water and Waste Digest. I'm here today with Mary Joyce Ivers. She is the APWA President, as well as Scott Grayson. He is the Chief Executive Officer for the APWA, which is the American Public Works Association. And we're going to talk a little bit about what utilities should be considering for 2021 and the rest of the year. So, Mary and Scott, thank you so much for being on the call with me today.
Hello, Bob.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, it's great to have you guys here. And Scott, it's great to see you again after our last conversation. But looking into 2021, what do you guys see as some critical considerations for water and wastewater utilities this year? I think from my perspective, really some funding. I know that there was recently a coronavirus stimulus package that had some water funding in it, so that's really helpful. What are some other areas that you guys are looking at and keeping in mind for your membership in 2021?
Well, Bob, we're really looking at all the financing that's out there. We've got it. APWA supports all the infrastructure for advancing quality of life for all our members across the nation. And of course, one of the critical life source is water and wastewater and keeping our communities healthy and safe. So one of the biggest issues, there's been identified over $700 billion of projects nationwide for infrastructure. So really getting that critical federal and state funding is going to help our communities as we are always competing for other resources as well. So those are one of the biggest things. So it is important with the WIFIA funding with federal and the state funding, and also with regulations. Those are also another big challenge for us, is being able to, we all want to do the right thing and provide healthy water systems to our communities. But it gets challenging too with regulations and finding the funding to meet those regulations and do it right. So
No,
Scott.
that's right. I would add, I mean, it's always a balancing act. One of the issues that the public may or may not understand is that state and local governments actually spend 65% of the funding on water, whereas the federal government picks up the rest. And when APWA speaks with members of Congress or agency heads, we really speak about this as a partnership. You know, it's not us showing up in Washington and holding our hands out for money. It's a partnership, but as we know, infrastructure is expensive. The other point that will be very important in this next year is focusing on the workforce issues. What we know in world of water is that there may be a shortage of operators. It's expected that we may lose about 1/3 of the workforce. There's about 1.7 million people right now who work in the water workforce, as you know, and with baby boomers now finally starting to leave the workforce, it will open up a lot of holes. So we've been working with the Department of Education, Department of Labor, EPA, and speaking a lot about getting ready and also helping urge them to work with us as a partner in creating workforce programs.
Mhm. That's a good point that you bring up, because looking at our State of the Industry survey report that we did in December, one of the things that I really came away from that is that there are a lot more people staying later, I think, in their job, like later into life.
Sure.
We had a large proportion of our audience who responded to that who were over the age of 60, some of them even over the age of 70. And to see that suggests to me that people are working later into life, and that really
Yes.
creates a huge issue. Then what happens when they leave? How do you promote the young people to fill their positions? How do you maintain that legacy knowledge? There's a lot of questions that have to be asked and answered when this comes to a head.
Yeah, if I may, I've been checking in with public works directors around the United States, mostly at the larger cities, seeing what COVID impacts have been. And what I am hearing is that there are plenty of infrastructure projects still happening. And they actually have shortages of hiring staff. We're hearing in the news a lot that there's a high rate of unemployment. They're surprisingly struggling to find appropriate people to help them with their infrastructure programs.
Yeah, the pipeline needs to be
Yeah,
filled, basically.
exactly.
To use a good analogy for water and wastewater.
Yeah.
Yes. So the other question that I wanted to ask you guys about was obviously we're considering there's going to be a change in presidential administration here in January. What, if any, changes do you suspect that will create for public works? And are there any specifics that you're thinking of for water and wastewater when it comes to what those changes could present to, public works and public utilities?
Well, we are excited that we have worked with the House Public Works Infrastructure Caucus, and we want to continue to maintain that relationship and sharing the critical information that APWA can provide for supporting those initiatives. It's also the importance of the balancing the environmental issues with the funding and the regulations, like we've mentioned before. And we want to make sure, that like the Clean Water Act, if there's any changes to that and how that's going to affect all of us. So we do look forward to working with the new administration and reaching out to all the new Congress members and representatives, and also the continuing to remind them. We do have our 117th Congress public priorities policies that we have put together that we encourage our members to share with their local representatives, as well as we will be meeting with the Hill staff to go over these items. And it's surface transportation reauthorization, emergency management, as well as the water and wastewater, water resiliencies policies that we have available to our members to share with them. So it's something that we like to communicate with them and letting them know the real stories that are out there and how important to the efforts that they're making, and understanding what their regulations and the funding can do to help our communities.
Picking up on that, Mary Joyce mentioned the House Public Works and Infrastructure Caucus. We work hand in hand with members of Congress to put on briefings all year long up on the Hill. Right now, it's actually been online, and we've held 2 online congressional briefings speaking about the role of public works, speaking about water issues, emergency management, roads, bridges, all of those great infrastructure things. So that's worked well. And then also what we're hearing about the incoming Biden administration is there will be a focus on environmental justice, and the focus from what we're hearing will be really an integrative approach of different agencies that will play a role. So even HHS and HUD and EPA will really work with one another. As we know, rates and the expense of infrastructure, it is and will be a large issue. How do local and state governments pay for their infrastructure without increasing rates so much that price the consumer out of the market as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important point you bring up. In 2020, one of the things that we noted became a much greater trend were the issues of water access, water affordability, and water equity. And I feel that those are just starting to really the snowball's really starting to roll down the hill on those. And I think they're becoming greater guiding principles for future things like what you're talking about. So to hear that the Biden administration seems to have kind of that same approach really suggests to me that we'll be hearing about those terms for a long time to come.
That's right. And the other issues of note that we see being even a larger issue are issues that deal with PFAS and the newer lead and copper rule, and
Yep.
then WOTUS as well. But that's,
Yeah.
where does the water start? Where does it end? We really focus on those issues a lot, and we believe that what's been coming out is important. But as we state, as our policy statements state, we and our members really do not want unfunded mandates. And a lot of these programs that have been, or the regs that have been finalized, imposes even more expense on local and state governments to repair the lines, to monitor PFAS as well. All important issues, but we need, as I said earlier, a partnership. How do we pay for this?
Yeah, that's something
Right.
that I'm hearing as well. Oh, sorry, Mary Joyce, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that in California, we've also got our municipal stormwater permit coming about, which is going to be competing for the funds for our water and wastewater with our citizens as well. So it's challenging to balance that because it is a water source for reestablishing our water supply and making sure our community is clean. So it's going to be interesting balancing those regulations with our water and wastewater, with our challenges in California.
Yeah, it's a truly complex web when it comes to water in the United States.
Yes.
It is. Right. I mean, as I stated, where does it start? Where does it end? Is it a puddle on the side of the road, or
Yeah,
a
yeah.
stream, a river?
Yeah, is the water rolling off my roof from the rain my water, or is that the aquifer's water?
Exactly right.
Yeah, there's a lot of
One of the other areas, our president here and I wrote a letter recently to the CDC. We wanted to make sure that water operators were part of the priority list of the vaccine process. When CDC and Homeland look at where the priority is and who frontline workers are, we wanted to make sure that those groups understood that people working in wastewater, clean water are part of that group. And we've been helping our chapters around North America. Actually, we operate up in Canada, with writing either their leaders of the province or governors of each state, trying to explain why it's important.
Mhm. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about some legislation that you guys are keeping on the mind. Are there other elements that you wanted to touch on that we haven't touched on so far?
Any
Well, in American Surface Transportation, the FAST Act, that's the other thing that's important to APWA, is with that expiring at the end of the year and having the regulations of keeping our roadways safe and looking at ways with vehicle miles traveled and the federal tax rate to get more money to maintain our road infrastructure as well. So that's another example of the competing priorities, but how important all of it is for the safety of our communities. So that is another important initiative that we are looking at and educating our Congress and members on as well to support that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And in the United States, we often look at water and roads and bridges as a separate entity. It's all infrastructure. And what we are hearing is that, I mean, we've had WRDA bills, and they usually pass fairly easily. But we've really struggled in the United States to pass a comprehensive infrastructure funding bill that recognizes that it's not just 1 year. It's multi-years, and that we need the appropriate funding infrastructure. What we also speak about, and we'll speak about more as bills are introduced, is asset management. We really lose sight of, it's not just about funding an infrastructure project, the new and shiny stuff, but what you can't see underneath your streets, and making sure that you have enough money for years out for maintenance. And Bob, I know you know this, but in the United States, we have plenty of wood water pipes from the late 1800s. Most people are not aware of that. And when we speak with members of Congress or Hill staff, and we bring that up, their eyes just open up. I mean, we have wood pipes, and as long as they stay wet, we're fine. But if they dry up, we have problems.
One thing with asset management we can learn from our North American partners in Canada is their asset management system is required to be robust and good inventories and condition assessments of all their assets to help them get the funding. And we feel that's important as well, as something that, we're trying to improve upon in my own agency. And it's real critical. And it's, if you can do predictive maintenance and predict what needs before it fails, it's really going to make a difference, and really more cost effective in the long run if we can invest up front on reliable, resilient systems and keep them maintained efficiently and effectively. And it really goes a long way.
Yeah, indeed. It makes
Even
every
though I'm
dollar
not
go
the
further.
interviewer. Sorry, Bob, even though I'm not the interviewer, what happens, Mary Joyce, when you're speaking with your city council about asset management and the importance of funding not only the new project, but understanding the long range impact of keeping it running? Do they understand that?
Yes, for the most part, it gets challenging because the things we can build these, but we need money to maintain it. So initially it's the funding source. Well, we can give you capital money, but you've got to try to figure out how to maintain it and do your priorities and reprioritize what needs to be done within maintaining your operation. So, but we are doing a better job of talking about our condition assessment and what the true benefit analysis is, and the risks of, if we have failures, it really is going to cost more if we have to respond on an emergency instead of planning ahead of time to take care of it and avoid it. And plus, looking at new technologies, if we can invest in upfront, it might cost more initially, but then it will save in the long run because it will be easier to maintain, and we can predict when something's going to fail. So that's really important, with like the Internet of Things and sensors and all that technology coming out too.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you guys talking a lot about like the funding elements and stuff like that. What are you hearing from congressional leaders and whatnot in regards to this as well? And how are you guys advancing those things with members of Congress?
Well, as I mentioned before, we've got our 117th Congress policies, and we will be reaching out. Scott mentioned our Hill briefings, and really sharing with them that we understand the challenges out there and we look for their support, and really trying to educate them as well as how important this funding is and how we can be a resource to support them with their initiatives that they're wanting to get moved forward and approved.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think Mary Joyce spoke about this when we opened, telling our story. There really is nothing more valuable than bringing our members up on the Hill right now, more likely over Zoom, but sharing their story, what's actually happening. We speak about infrastructure, whether it's water or other forms of infrastructure, as new items. And it's really more about the stuff that you don't ever see. And so that's part of it. The other part, though, is that when the Trump administration started 4 years ago, we were all speaking about spending $1 trillion on infrastructure. And most of our discussions that we had up on the Hill went like this: Democrats, Republicans both want it. but nobody knows where the money is going to come from. And it's really about the will. We were fortunately able to find a lot of money recently to help cities and states and businesses. So it is possible if the will is there. And as I stated earlier, one of the important points is it's not just everybody asking for federal money. There are a lot of, as I said, state and local government spending a lot on infrastructure. We also have encouraged over the years, to have as many options as possible, like municipal bonds are important. There was a period a couple of years ago where some members of Congress were speaking about getting rid of that, but it's a really great instrument for local and state governments to fund their own projects, and that's remained in place, which is good. So those are the kinds of elements.
I wanted to share our story. We have a really exciting project going in Ventura called Ventura Water Pure. We are on the Pacific Ocean, an hour north of Los Angeles, and we have 2 natural rivers and an estuary. So we are working on our financing for a 228 million water purification that we can redischarge into our groundwater system and then treat it and then reuse it. And so that part of that is through grants, the WIFIA loans, the state revolving fund, as well as bonds and other sources. And so our Ventura Water team's doing, with our council support, is doing amazing work with and using technology and protecting our environment, preserving our endangered species. So we're really excited to see how this project comes together. And a lot of work's going into it, as well as just recently taking advantage of the bond rates and refinancing and able to pass that along to our ratepayers to help minimize the impact. So we're excited about protecting our environment, providing a good wastewater system. So it's something that we think will be a good project and help, but it is working with the federal government, getting the funding, as well as all the regulatory. That's something else with getting through the regulatory system, is hopefully we've been working on, we all could, working with the government on streamlining that, because the quicker we can get through our permits, the quicker we can build these projects, but getting to the same exact condition of protecting the environment as doing this, because some of that streamlining is not losing any of the goal of doing a good project and protecting our environment.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of real life stories. How does this actually work in real life? One of the other related elements, picking up on the environmental issue, what we also hear a lot is that there are some states that, like California, that have even more stringent environmental regulations than EPA. Mm-hmm. And what's often required for projects are meeting the state regulations as well as the federal ones. And when we speak with EPA and others, we speak about, well, let's be smart about it. I mean, if it's already meeting a very high level and high standard of environmental protection, we shouldn't need to hop through so many more bureaucratic hoops that add more years on a project or more dollars as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I do appreciate you guys both taking the time today to speak with me, Mary Joyce and Scott. Thank you so much for being here. For everyone who's watching, if you would like to learn more about APWA, we'll leave a link down in the description below, and you can follow it and check out everything they've got going on throughout 2021.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Great to talk to you. Thank you, Scott.